Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Facebook Live on Search and Rescue. We are having a small bit of technical difficulties with our host. So she is downloading a piece of software. So you guys just have me for a moment. So Nancy's helping her with that. So let us know that you're out there. Let's see who can join us tonight. I'm sure Nancy's going to redo the introductions, but Donna, we met Donna as a CO for NACSW trials and found out that she also does a lot of search and rescue work. So we're really excited to talk to her tonight and see what she has. Hi, everybody. Hi, Judy. Hi, Sue. Patty. Right. Good. Hi, Mel. Hi, Deb. Hi, Lynn. I get to vamp for a while. So looking forward to this tonight. So I'm just gonna be curious here. Does anybody have any burning questions that you already know that you want to ask her? I'm excited to hear about search and rescue. I think we hear about it, but we don't ever hear from the people who really do it, right? They get these calls and sometimes get deployed at 5 o'clock in the morning to go out and find people. I think sometimes they tragically find people that are not still alive. So I know that's not the ideal, but it'll be interesting. All right. Hi, Barb, Judy, Audrey, Sharon. Hi, Beth. Right. Hi, Ronnie. So if you guys didn't catch this, if you're just tuning in, there's a little bit of technical difficulties with Donna. So she's downloading a little piece of software there. Nancy's guiding her. So you guys just get to watch me. So I think they were trying to get Chrome onto her computer. So hopefully that doesn't take too long to download and everybody can be back with us. So I was asking if anybody out there had anything interesting that they already knew they wanted to ask. So I'm not sure how Donna's been doing this. She'll tell us, but very interesting, especially how people can balance their lives too. That's one of the questions I have. You know, I know that you can get a call, and if you're a true search and rescue person, I think a lot of times you just have to pick up and go no matter what time it is. So I think that'd be a really interesting question from my point is how do you balance your life if you never know when those phone calls are coming? Yeah, Mel. So Melanie, you had a similar question, right? How can you be a CO for Nosework or be somebody that's on call as a supervising CO, right? And get a call to go out and on search, try and find somebody. Hi, Carolyn. Right. Feel like I should sing a song or something. I don't want to lose any viewers though, so I'll refrain. What qualities do you look for in a dog that might be good in search and rescue? That's a really good question. It's interesting to me all the breeds that they have, right? And depending on where. I always find it funny, like the Saint Bernards, right? What about a dance? Thanks, Mel. You know, Saint Bernards were really good, but they're so big and they seem so interesting. So, all right.
All right.
Yay!
Working? Yay!
Working. Joanne, you were like,
thank you.
Joanne,
my history in theater that I could just sit here.
Oh my God.
She's the backup band.
Yeah. Well, thank God for your, thank God for your patience. Technology, like we said, it's great when it works, but it's a hell when it doesn't. But we figured. Luckily, it wasn't anything major, so we got it. We got it going on. So as Joanne was alluding to, we are going to be talking about search and rescue. While Donna,
Thanks, Sue.
we met Donna. We met Donna through NACSW and Nosework. She's a CO, a judge, and instructor, I believe. But she also does a lot of search and rescue, which is fascinating. And I've always, over the years, and Donna has been a great mentor to me in Nosework as a CO. So I've learned so much from her. So I wanted to bring her on to talk about what she does, because one of the questions I asked her years ago was, how do you go out there and find, sometimes you're finding human remains, how difficult that must be? And her answer was, she wants to give the family closure. I thought that was the coolest reason to do it. And I'm like, oh, because that would be hard. Anyway, we're going to refrain from anymore, and we're going to ask Donna a little bit to tell us a little bit about her background and how long she's been doing search and rescue, because I think it's been a long time. She also has shepherds, so she gets points for that. Also has shepherds, and she does search and rescue with shepherds, and I've gotten to see a few of her dogs work, so it's been pretty interesting. So Donna, how did you get started in search and rescue, and how long? And Donna's has some great stories about training, so looking forward to it. So turn it over to you.
Well, good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me to have this little chat session. I always love talking about dogs and search and rescue, of course. So I got started back in the late 90s when I don't know if you remember the Armenia earthquakes that occurred back in 1988. And that's when I first started to read about how dogs were used to find people in disasters.
I see shepherd ears.
He just threw his ball in a whole bunch of pictures. And he worked all day.
Wow.
So it fascinated me. And it just so happened that, excuse me, Zeke, enough. My German Shepherd Club hosted a talk by a woman who was doing search and rescue. And at that time, there were very few search and rescue companies units throughout the country. It hadn't really started until the mid-'70s when Bill and Jean Saratuck brought search and rescue, the way we know it, wilderness search and rescue, to the United States. Prior to that, Switzerland and a couple of other European countries were doing avalanche work. Oh. And Bill went over there and, learned from a lot of these people. Now, we didn't have so much of avalanche work here at that point, but Bill and Jean were from Washington State, and lots of hikers got lost in the woods. Oh. So they started to develop a search and rescue unit, and then they started the American Rescue Dog Association, which was a national organization. And the woman that first spoke to my German Shepherd Club was the president of Ramapo Rescue Dogs in New York. And that was one of the only search and rescue units on the East Coast. There had been one previously, a sister unit, but that unit was depleted. So I was really excited to hear this talk. And once I did, I was just captured. It was everything I love to do. I've always worked with my dogs. Back then I was doing Schutzen. but I was always involved in obedience. I loved working with the dogs, and I always loved being out in the woods. As a kid, I spent all my time out in the woods. So this tied in all of that, being able to work a dog, especially a breed that really needs to work and have a job, being out in the woods, and then giving back to your community. I just felt there's really nothing better.
Wow. So that's when you started going out to do. So you started in search and rescue when it was really not a.
It wasn't really a thing. Yeah, it was back in. I started in 1989, and
Wow.
Yeah, things were much different way back then. We didn't do too much with trained behaviors. We did recall refines. See, that's enough. Excuse me, I'm gonna have to get here.
Yeah. That's fine.
Can't leave a shepherd without his ball.
Well, the thing is, this is on a side note while she takes care of the little prince. One of the things you want in a search and rescue dog is persistence, right? You want the dogs to persist, and he's got a lot of that. So it's true. It's one of the qualities you would look for in a rescue dog.
Yes.
But that's on the other side of the coin. So it's great. Yeah, he's a perfect demonstration of one of the things you need. Somebody to, I think there was
Exactly.
what you need is persistence, and he's got that. My shepherds would not be good at. They're not that persistent. Especially my boy. He's a little bit of a.
Oh, your boy is lovely. He's.
Oh my God. So do you do search and rescue for remains and live, or do you have to?
So when I started in search and rescue, there were really no cadaver dogs or human remains, as it's called now. We just discovered that dogs trained just to find human scent could also find dead bodies. So that started the police to call us for looking for deceased victims, homicide cases. Back in the 90s, I can't tell you how many serial killer cases we were involved in. Because, the dogs could do both. Now, yes, there are some instances where there are some dogs that don't like the smell of human decomp. But we found it rare, at least in our German Shepherds. And it's not that, if you didn't train for it, it's not that they're going to give you some kind of trained behavior for it. But we would definitely recognize the changes of behavior. And that's what's so important. We can tie that into nose work, because that's what really is the foundation for what we need to know in reading our dogs. But anyway, back to search and rescue. It started to become more fashionable. In fact, it was the press that coined the word cadaver dog. Back in the 90s. We started to get a little bit more formalized with it then as well, because if you had to go to court, which I had to on several occasions, and I'm actually qualified as an expert witness, you can't tell a jury or a judge that, yes, this is the change of behavior I saw in my dog, right? They don't understand that.
Right.
So they really needed some qualifiable behavior that Joe Blow could understand. And that's when we started to get more involved with trained behaviors. But my prior work with search and rescue was a live find wilderness dog. And, that moved into the human remains realm, because most of our searches back in the 90s were looking for dead people.
Mm.
And actually my very first search with my dog, which was a water search, and it was her first find, was a deceased victim in the water. So it really intertwined. But then you really started, as the 2000s, we got into 2000s, you really started to see specializations, because that's also when FEMA started. And I was actually on the first, before FEMA, OFTA was the federal department that did search and rescue work. So OFTA turned into FEMA, and I was on a FEMA team with a live find dog. Now, FEMA did not want dogs to indicate on deceased victims. And, that's understandable, because if you're in a hurry and you're searching a disaster site, right, you don't want rescue spending a lot of time uncovering people that are deceased. So they just wanted the dogs to specifically find live human scent. But after 9/11, I realized how important it was to get dogs that were specialized in human remains, because a lot of what we call wilderness dogs, not on a FEMA team that actually train on rubble, those dogs weren't used to that environment. And I'll tell you that's what scraps a lot of even live find dogs from disaster work, is the environment, right? That rubble is not fun to work on. It has a lot of voids. It has wobbly surfaces. It has dark tunnels. So that's not an environment a lot of dogs like to work in. But having a dog that will find human remains, especially in a disaster where there are very few live people, I have to say, right, that you actually uncover. But having the ability to get people that have passed and have closure for their families is just as important. And in 9/11, where, you're talking about just pieces, we would have been able to identify a lot more victims if we had dogs of that caliber. So I started working on that with my task force in New Jersey. And we developed a standard for human remains disaster dogs. And two of my dogs were my first dog that I ran with this was the first dog nationally to be certified in disaster HRD.
So now there's a difference with dogs that work disaster things versus wilderness finding lost hiker.
There can be when all of this started, in order to get on a FEMA team, you had to be in a wilderness team. Now, as the years went by, that's kind of changed. You can just go on a disaster team, a task force. I really think, and there's still some people we have people in my unit that do both. And I really think it's really the best way to approach this, because in wilderness, you're working long hours. When you train for disaster, the dogs are up on the rubble pile, maybe 15 minutes, and then they're down, and then you're working, another dog, and then you may get back up there again. But when you get deployed, you're deployed for 12 hours. So, I really think it's it's best to be on both types of teams, but it's not a requirement now.
Yeah. So Melanie asked, can you train search and rescue and still play nose work?
Yes, you can. I don't do it because my dog is specifically a human remains dog. And it's fine if you're just human remains doing wilderness, which means you're going to find a body on top of the ground. But if you're doing more forensic type work, which is what I get involved in, and you have to go to court, I've had cases where there was a 3-year-old who went missing in Newark, and it was at a big party. When we were called in, they had a suspect, but they had no body. So we were looking for, or the little girl, hopefully still alive, but as the days went on, we knew she was deceased. And there was a good idea that this is what happened, because the suspect, who was a 16-year-old boy, said that he found her clothes and washed them. Now, we were
right.
What 16-year-old boy is gonna wash? They don't wash their own clothes, right? So a week went by, and I think we worked that search 2 days. Then nothing happened. The FBI came in. They started from scratch and found the little girl's body in the apartment where the suspect lived. Everybody had searched that building, so they knew she had been moved.
Oh.
They called us in. I worked the area where they found her, and then I worked the kitchen, or actually the entire apartment. And my dog hit on what was the pantry in the kitchen. I mean, this was not a well-kept house. So the pantry really wasn't a pantry. It was just loaded with all kinds of things, clothes and material and all kinds of stuff. So she hit on that strong. But I still took her to closets in the bedroom, right, to make sure, right, she was a live find dog, because this was back when we were doing live find and HR.
Right.
Nothing. Brought her back again. She hit strong on that. So it turned out that the body was wrapped in a drape, and the matching pair of the drape was in that pantry. And then when we pulled that out, there was fluid there. So now I had to go to court to testify that the body had been there.
Oh.
So that's the issue. It's fine if there's a visible body or part, but if you're just doing forensic work, and especially nowadays, a good defense attorney, they're going to Google your name and they're going to see exactly what you've done for the last 20 years. So if they see my dog also does nose work and will alert on birch, anise, and clove,
right?
What are they going to say in a pantry and a kitchen, right?
Sure. Yeah. Well, that makes sense for sure. Yeah.
But yes, there's no reason why you could not do search and rescue especially if you're doing live find and then do nose work.
So Donna, you had mentioned the disaster work and how they were really trying to do live find dogs instead of human remains. When you talk about something like 9/11 or a real recent disaster where maybe those dogs are being deployed in 12 hours, what to the dog, what differentiates recently deceased to becoming human remains to being alive still? I mean, how does the dog know?
So we have to train for that, because you're right. There's a different scent picture. So if you have a recent deceased person or remains that are really fresh, that may have a different scent picture to the dog than something that's 100 years old. There's still some molecule that says to the dog, this is human.
Yes.
So we still have that, because one of the areas that we train our dog in, and it's actually part of our certification test, is that there is a very clean old human bone very near, it's close proximity to a very clean animal bone. And the dog has to distinguish the difference. And they can do that very easily with training. So there is definitely some human component to it. So they've got that. To be honest, we don't know what what we call the odor signature is exactly for human remains. So we have to expose them to everything.
Okay.
Recent dead, years old dead, blood, tissue, organs, skin, any component we can think of,
Right.
because we don't know what the common denominator is. And Florida University has been working on this for years. They took training aids from canine handlers and did mass spec on these. I think they had 12 different training aids. And the dogs easily could find all of those 12. With mass spec, there was no common denominator in the headspace of any of those. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means that our instrumentation is not yet up to
The canine.
Exactly. It's not as sensitive as the canine's nose.
Right.
So since we don't know what the odor signature is, we really have to train them on a whole realm of things.
Wow. So somebody asked about what kind of dogs, and I know we talked a little bit when you went to put Zeke away. What are the qualities you look for in a dog that's going to do that kind of work? Because it's got to be a certain dog for sure.
Yeah, it does. So what we look for is you want a dog. Let's face it, and we see it in nose work, right? All dogs have fabulous noses. They can all acquire the sense that we're interested in. But what we want is a dog that's been bred and programmed to want to work with people, because finding something is the easy part for them, right? That's a piece of cake. But the important part for us is for them to be willing to tell us about that, right?
Right.
So we want a dog that, likes that engagement, wants that partnership. We also look at, the size of the dog. They have to be not too big,
right?
So that, they're agile. They can cover a lot of ground. Their agility is good, especially for, the disaster environment, and even wilderness. You're doing wilderness with a lot of deadfall. They're hopping over things continually. You want a dog that has a coat where, they're protected not only in the winter, but in the summer as well. So a good double coat will help a dog, not get sunburn.
Right.
And not, need coats and God knows what else in the winter in the snow.
So what type of breeds do you see mostly in search and rescue?
Primarily your herding breeds and sport. So you see a lot of labs, German shepherds, Some Goldens, not too many anymore. I've seen some Aussies. Back when FEMA first started, we saw more border collies, but the border collies can be very sensitive.
Yes, yes, it can.
It just wasn't the environment for them. But those typically are the breeds. Seeing a lot more labs now.
Yeah, labs are pretty sturdy. Mine's a little pesty one too. So I think Tim had a question. What certifications or qualifications, or how do you start if somebody wants to do search and rescue? I know, Tim, it's a funny story. Many years ago, I wanted to do search and rescue with my big lab mix that I had. And one of the things the group told me locally said, hey, if you're interested in doing it, you have to be willing to lose your dog, meaning that it might, it might die in that process. And I'm like, well, I was kind of a weenie then. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. But I know there's a lot more to that. I'm just saying. But that was a question they asked me and posed to me, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm really interested in doing that, right?
Well, back when FEMA started, that's what they would say. They were talking about sending in a dog where people, you've got engineers and structural engineers and all of these people test the environment before they'll let our search and rescue people in, right? And they deem it not qualified, but they were saying they wanted to send the dog in. And, we were all like, all right, you rescue guys, you don't want to throw your big heavy tools right just down in a pit to see what happens. Well, this not only is a tool for us, but it's our partners,
right?
We depend on our lives together. It's that kind of partnership. So that quickly went out the window, thank goodness.
If you think about it, that was like 15. That was like 15 or 20 years ago.
Probably.
Long time.
Yeah, that's about the time that.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, and then I decided, nah, I don't want to do that. So how if somebody was interested in doing that, I know you'd have to have the right dog. That's number one. If you just happen to have a very dog that needs to work. So like for the only one of my dogs that would qualify right now is my lab. She's willing to work. My shepherds are very, kept.
It's cold out here. You want me to walk in this?
And probably Joanne's Doberman, but Mr.
The Vizsla, definitely not.
The Vizsla wouldn't be caught dead out there. Are you kidding?
No.
Yeah.
Say what? It's my
We'll be like, no. Do you see how cold it is? I can't do that. Anyway, so besides having the right dog, what kind of and also what your schedule is like? If they call you for a job, do you just drop everything and go, or are you able to select where you go?
Yeah. So to get involved in search and rescue, you have to find a unit in your vicinity. And then typically, like what we'll do is invite that person and their dog to a training. My unit only has German Shepherds, only because that's what we've always used. And that's what we're comfortable with. Most of the people that come on board, even if they're law enforcement, they're really not dog trainers. Now, we might make an exception for someone who has a lot of experience with a particular breed that we don't know, but every breed is different. And the people that come to us, this is all new to them. And how do we make that dog successful if we don't have enough experience with it. But there are many all breed units, so you just have to find one that suits you. They will evaluate the dog, or they should evaluate the dog, and we generally have these people walk along with a handler to see that end of it. Then there'll be a victim or subject. We hate to say victim anymore. For a handler. And so they get a taste of it. And I have to say, a lot of people, when, they'll come a couple of months and then they realize this is a lot more work than I really anticipated.
Yeah.
It's not a glorious job. It really isn't, because you're out in the field for hours and hours, and most of our work really is clearing areas.
Yeah, right.
Very few times are you lucky enough to get the area where that missing person is. So it's not glamorous. And as far as being able to respond, that is an issue, because if you're on a task force, your employer has to sign a paper that will allow you to be out of your job for 10 to 12 days.
Wow.
And a lot of companies aren't willing to do that. So that limits a lot of people as well. And even for wilderness work, if you can't have some space in your life where we don't expect people to get to every search, but we can't have people on because we're spending a lot of time training people and dogs. So we can't have someone who can only respond like once a year.
Yeah, that makes sense. So speaking of that, then how do you handle the emotional piece of it? I would say from you and your dog, right? We're out. We worked really hard. We didn't find anything.
So after the bombing in Oklahoma City, and this was for disaster now, but because we were kind of doing this in the wilderness aspect of it prior to that, there was a lot of talk about the dogs being depressed.
Oh.
And dogs, because they were finding so many human dead bodies, and that, dogs don't think like that. It wasn't that they were depressed because there were so many dead bodies. It was what they were feeding off from their handler, and they were live fine dogs and never got rewarded. And that really, for the dogs we choose, was even more important than what they were feeding off the handler. So after that, what we've done is, you work, because you've got a 12-hour shift, but that doesn't mean you're continually working 12 hours, because you'll have the structural engineer come in, he clears it. Then, you've got somebody else in there. Then because you've got a strike team. So 3 people go in, then you're assigned an area. So then you work that area, maybe 2 hours, and then you come off until they, have another designated area for you. So on that off time, we would have a person go hide. So that the dog would get that reward.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then they're satisfied, because that's what they're working for.
Right.
Sure.
That makes total sense. Yeah, because you're right. I was going to say, I know the dogs, it's not because they were finding, it's just, I'm sure people, the handlers finding, So let me ask you, some of the search and rescue people, how are they mentally dealing with, I mean, you have to know going in, that's part of the job.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. And I think I told you, Nancy, that first search that I had, that I mentioned earlier, it was a 21-year-old guy, just graduated Fordham University. His parents had a house on Lake Wallenpaupack, which is a big lake in northeastern Pennsylvania. And actually where we've always had our CO meetings, Nancy.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes.
And there he had a big graduation party. The night was this god-awful, dreary night. And he and his girlfriend decided to take the rowboat out on the lake. And they went out and the boat capsized, and he told her to swim back for shore and he was going to pull the boat in. He was a football player, big scrappy guy. Well, she made it and he never did. So the next day we're out there searching for him, and his mother and sister were on the dock. And of course, they're just crying, just beside themselves. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if I want to do this. It was so heart-wrenching until I heard the mother say, "I just want a body to bury." And that was the click for me. That's all you can do for that person. That's the best thing you can do for that person. Flowers aren't going to cut it. Sympathy cards aren't going to cut it.
Yeah.
That closure, that body to bury. So that's how I keep my mind. My education is also as a scientist. So that part of it, the forensic part of it, has always been, of great interest to me.
Yeah.
So I can move my head and compartmentalize my head into that aspect of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's got to be difficult, right? But yes. And I thought, yeah, that would be, because that's a tough job, but that would be the only way you get through it, because that's tough to find that. But doing that for a person, at least, because there's nothing you can do about the situation, but you can give them that
closure.
The closure. Yeah. That was it.
And I think you have to be, like most of us, especially in disaster search, we're kind of like adrenaline junkies. You kind of thrive on that. It's, the people that run away and the people that run toward.
Yes, right. You have to be one of those.
Yeah, you have to be one of those that run into it.
Yeah, not away from it. Yes, right. Agreed. Right. Agreed.
So someone had asked, and I'm not sure if these are search and rescue, but how do dogs indicate a car trail? So if somebody gets into a car and drives away, is that more a patrol dog or is that search and rescue as well?
So that's a trailing dog. It doesn't have to be a patrol dog, no, because it's really let me clarify that. Most of the patrol dogs are trained for hot pursuit.
Oh, yeah.
So, but there are vapor wake dogs that Auburn University's been working on. I think University of Pennsylvania is doing that too. And there are some trailing people that have done dogs trailing after scent that's been left from someone that got into a car and left by car. I think the circumstances have to be just perfect for that to happen.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen that they were working with bloodhounds to do that work.
Yes.
Right. I saw it recently, and it was bloodhounds that they were using to do that, where you get in the car and they would drive and be able to pick that up. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you want the best trailing dog, get a bloodhound.
Yeah. So Jen asked if you can have a people reactive dog working HRD, human remains. Interesting.
Not,
Probably not. Just
yeah,
they
not
want to
so
find
much
people,
because even
dead or alive.
yeah, because you may, their source may be dead, but you're always working around other people, right?
Hmm.
So, it's not like you're out there all by yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, there's always either there's law enforcement around, or we have flankers with us, and sometimes it may be someone assigned to you that dog doesn't know. So it's not certainly the best circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would bet, especially in wilderness, there's heavy brush. Somebody might pop out not knowing that there's a human reactive dog, right?
Yeah. You run a risk, and if that dog bites somebody, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, and the truth is, it would be really stressful for the dog anyway.
It would. I totally agree. That would be really stressful, because lots of times everybody crowds around, right, watching that dog work.
Right.
Especially with in certain circumstances. So wouldn't be good.
Yeah. So Dave had a question about laws. Is there anything about laws that allow search teams to possess human remains for training purposes?
You can't make your own, Dave.
Yeah.
So that all depends on the state. It's very state specific. In Pennsylvania has actually looser laws than New Jersey. In New Jersey, we need to have a chain of command. So the person providing us the source signs it off to, say, me. If I give that source to a unit member, I have to sign it off to them.
Okay.
And we have to have the location of that source every time it's moved.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
it's definitely it's state specific.
So how long does it take to get a dog ready? Like once you get a dog, how long does it take in training? How long does it take for the dog to get out there and do stuff?
Say if it's a brandy new handler, it would take close to 2 years.
Yeah.
And most of us start with puppies. So, that's going to take a little longer because
Mm-hmm.
you want the dog, it's a puppy, right? So they've got to grow and
Mature and
yeah. And
oh my God.
as Nancy, you and I know, the males that could be like 5 years. So yeah.
Oh my God. It would take forever for other people. I don't know. We'd probably, and he's so big, he'd probably, by the time he'd be ready to work, he'd be like, okay, he's done. He's tired. And some of these guys don't ever mature, but I think definitely having a dog that really wants to work all the time is really going to have to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has to be.
And that's what we select. We look for a line that has that high hunt drive
and a lot of persistence, which is tough to live with. Just unless you, like you said, you worked him all day and he's still like, okay.
Yeah, he's still, all right, let's go.
It's like,
yeah. So, like with wilderness, it's not just the dog that you're training. And even in wilderness, right, it's constantly moving to new places because they have to get adjusted to different environments. This happens, but it happens here and it happens here and it happens all over. And then the distance, right? The time, we move up into increments because, we're working our dogs for long periods of time. So that has to be slowly expanded. The trained indication has to be worked on. The handler in wilderness has to have first aid certifications, CPR, map and compass, GPS, and that's the big one. You know, people, the dogs go, whoo, they've got it, and people are still struggling with how to read a map and use a compass. So it's all of those things. So it's not just the dog, it's the person as well. And there's a lot of courses we have to take.
Wow. Yeah. And I can imagine the younger people coming up now that don't even know how to read a map.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We don't, with our new people, we don't let them use their GPS until they're proficient, because, you know, we all have GPSs now, but if that thing fails,
yeah, you have to be able
and
to.
you're out in the woods, then, you know.
Yeah.
There'll be a dog coming for you.
Exactly. We're looking for you.
And you don't want to add to that,
No.
to that situation.
Yeah. So Aaron had asked the question, do the dogs have to go through any medical testing, like after a disaster such as like 9/11, they breathed in all of that concrete dust?
Mm-hmm.
And a secondary to that is, if you find something, is that your responsibility because these are personal owned dogs, or how does that work?
So question number one, yes, the dogs were monitored. When you're in a disaster situation, they're monitored constant. Every time you get off your shift, they're monitored, and the handler as well. So yeah, that happens routinely. After 9/11, Cindy Otto did a 2-year study looking at, you know, doing health checks on all of the dogs. And that was an interesting study because there were no really ill effects on the dogs. Humans, yes, but dogs have a much shorter lifespan than we do. So all of the ill effects from 9/11 took a few years to really come to the surface.
Oh.
By then, the dogs were gone.
Oh, yeah.
And your second question, is it our responsibility? No, because we're working through law enforcement.
Okay. So if your dog broke his leg or something, right, they're gonna help you get to the vet and take care of that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is. So I think this is a two-part. Oh, so Ronnie asked, do you have to work off leash outside? And a second part to that is, how often do you train your dogs? Like, what's your training schedule when you're working with them?
So yes, our dogs are worked 90% of the time off leash. On rare occasions, and we have to train for that also. Sometimes you're working the side of a highway. So, you know, for safety reasons, we have the dogs on a long line. But primarily they're worked off leash. And I'm sorry, what was the next part to that?
How often do you train?
Yes. So we train twice a month with the unit. And if you're bringing up a dog, so you're not certified yet, you should be training every day. And many of us in our unit will get together with each other, you know, to work together. My dog is certified. He's on maintenance. I still work him at least 4 times a week. So, and, you know, remember, we're picking the type of dog that they're not going to let you sit around. They're going to be like, we got to get out. Yeah, okay, let's go. Let's, you know, get that ball. They're shoving it in your hand. You know, it's like they need, if you don't work them, all that energy goes into very bad places.
Yes, I can imagine. So you would use mostly Toy-Roid toy reward dogs.
Yeah, they're all toy reward.
Okay.
And when you're starting a puppy, we use food.
Mm-hmm.
But once they're, we always call it the ball gene for German Shepherds.
Yeah.
It kind of kicks in when they're about 6-7 months old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the food isn't quite as important.
Yeah. That's true. You know, that's true. That because Tango likes balls a lot. He's eaten a couple. But yeah, he wasn't really interested until he was a little older.
Yeah.
He wasn't like, it wasn't a thing like, oh, look, he's not interested, because Cha-Cha, my other shepherd, always was. But he didn't show any interest until he was a little older. So that's interesting. Because he never.
So do you try and transition them to the toy because it's easier? You don't have to have the cooler of treats with you, or is it just the dog seems to prefer it more?
No, that what we find is they prefer that. They get to a certain age and, you're doing food. And then all of a sudden you start to see the motivation start to dip a little. And you bring that toy out and boom, it skyrockets. So it's by their schedule, their calendar.
That's interesting, because that's now that you mention it, Tango didn't show very much interest in it until he was a bit older, or even in retrieving or anything like that. He was a very slow maturer that way, right? He wasn't as into it. So
and I think too, there's their teeth are just coming in, they're solidifying, maybe that has something to do with the two. And once all of that's set, then hey, wow, this really feels good.
Mm-hmm. So kind of piggybacking on Jennifer's question about human reactivity. So usually with the dog, can you have a dog reactive dog?
You can. Especially for human remains. Yes, you can. There might be some instances, some of, like, I just had a search out in Lancaster County for a kidnapped and murdered Amish girl. And I mean, we had huge areas, and that's some part of human remains as well. It's not just close forensics, but it could be a lost hunter, or in this case, a girl that was kidnapped. So, like one of my areas was 17 acres, and there was a dog working in the next sector. So that can happen. I know of people, though, that you want to know, all right, is there anybody around me? Can I get a sector where, there's not going to be close contact with another dog?
Mm-hmm.
It can be accommodated. If the dog is rock solid and it's a really good dog, I would hate to lose it.
Right. Well, no, and I think, depending on how reactive it is, a lot of times you can just teach them just to ignore other dogs, and just, they don't have to love other dogs, but they can just.
Yeah, one of my dogs, I mean, he was a very serious, strong dog, and he never started a fight, but boy, you'd make his day if, you came at him. But when he was working, he didn't care who was near him.
Right.
They're just so focused on that job. And that's what you see often.
Yeah.
It's not like, they're on free time and they have nothing else to do. So, let me go.
Yeah, and do that. Right.
Yeah.
If they're working, they're usually pretty,
They're focused.
Yeah. Aaron.
Disaster, it's a little bit trickier because you've got dogs that are working close to each other. And actually it's one of the things you have to pass in the certification test is dog aggression.
Well, yeah, that would make sense, because it's like there shouldn't be anything to take them off task, right?
Right.
And most of the disaster work, like you said, is off leash, right? So
it's all
makes sense. Yeah.
You can even wear a collar.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, does your oh, Aaron asked about the breeds. Since your unit does shepherds, is there a specific breeder most of you use, or does everybody use a different breed, or just look for the more drivey dogs?
Yeah, I mean, we have, like, right now in my unit, there's 2 people that have dogs from one particular kennel. My dog and another 2 dogs come from another person. I it just worked out that way. Typically, what we do, like, all of my dogs that I've had in search and rescue weren't from the same person.
Hmm.
I've loved all of the breeders I've gotten dogs from, but it all depends on who has what when I need it.
Mm.
Sure, sure.
So
Yeah,
that's gonna be my deciding factor. 'Cause
right.
there's a lot of good breeders out there.
Yeah, yeah. So you just have to. That makes sense. And Carol said, "Do you need to be personally fit?" Well, kind of, right? You have to be
Yeah.
able.
Yeah.
12
Yeah,
hours is a lot of walking.
a lot of walking and a lot of climbing and yeah.
Well, and you're doing Donna had to have a replacement of parts, but now so that must have been tough during that time
It was, yes. It
um,
was.
to train and do all that stuff because you had Zeke at the time still, right? Yeah,
Yes.
and he was younger, so
He was young, yes.
because how old is he now?
He just turned 5.
Oh my God, really?
Yep, I can't believe it either.
He was just a puppy.
I know.
So really quickly, what was one of your most rewarding or uh, one of your most interesting search and that where there was a find, whether it was a not alive or whatever? What was one of the most interesting? I know you've had a lot, but
Oh, wow. Most interesting. Well, it's always nice when you find someone who's still alive.
sure.
So that always stays up there in the front of your mind. I mean, we've had some crazy searches that kind of stick out. There was this one. A woman had escaped from a psychiatric hospital.
I
So,
can't wait to start a story. A woman escaped from a psychiatrist.
so we get called in, and it's this beautiful private psychiatric hospital. But uh, all of a sudden, New York State Police called us in missing persons, and the detective on the case, had another case he was called to. So we were working with, one of the patrolmen, and he was telling us if the family comes, don't talk to them; they're crazy. And we're not getting any information from the hospital administration. It's like, is this person a danger to herself? Is she a danger to us? What was she wearing? We were getting nothing. Just go out in the woods and look for a woman. So we go out, and the family does come. It was the woman's sister and brother. So, they're very upset. They want to help, and they wanted to go out and look. Now, generally, what we try to do is get them entertained with, just sit down, write what information. We want to keep them busy, right?
Mhm.
Because you
Right,
don't want the family to discover something awful.
right, right.
So during the course of their conversation, we discover that this woman was a very high up administrative assistant. And she was having an affair. And she worked for Hitachi. All right. So this is a Japanese company. And she was having an affair with somebody way up there. And word started to get out. And she got a death threat. And she told her boss. So he said he would take care of it. And then she goes home and he calls her the next day and he says, we're going to go for a business meeting to another state. So pack a bag. And, this happens at that level, right? So she packed her bag, limo picked her up and admitted her into this psychiatric hospital. So sure enough, there were messages on her phone because her daughter lived with her from this woman telling, her daughter, they have me in here. You have to come. Now her daughter was away. So, I mean, it was crazy. So she wound up, we didn't find her that day, but she did contact us because, we were really, we're very empathetic to the sister and brother. And they contacted us and said the woman had contacted them and said she was okay, but she was not coming home. So yeah, there were really weird things like that.
Wow.
that kind of stick in my head.
That's a movie. That's a movie plot.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there was a lot more to it that I really don't remember all the details, but it was very strange. But yeah, finding a person alive is really
So
the best.
Michelle asked, if you're searching for a dangerous or psychiatric patient, do you carry a weapon for additional protection for you or your dog or no?
No, we do not.
Yeah, because that would be probably not a good thing.
Sure you do. You have a shepherd.
I have a shepherd, and trust me, I've been in a lot of areas where I'm like, I am very happy I have a German shepherd.
Yeah, well, that's true. Even though mine didn't read the manual, they look scary.
No, we don't. But you do have, now you can decide you're not going to take that search. I've had searches in Newark where, it was like midnight and you had to get a police escort to get to the site. And then the police will tell you, well, yeah, that's the abandoned building we want you to search. And they stand outside. And there's drugs going on all over the place. And that's when that time I did work my dog on lead first and cleared the building. And then I let her off leash because that's my fear. I don't care about myself. I don't want anybody to shoot my dog.
Yeah, no kidding.
Wow.
That's all right, Donna.
Yeah. So Aaron had one more question.
Yep.
Sure.
Whoop, I said Aaron had one more question. Have you ever had a dog not work out?
No, I have not. We've had dogs in the unit, especially further way back when. I think we've gotten better at learning sooner who's going to make it and who isn't. But no, knock on wood, I've never had a dog that.
Yeah, well, I think you get better at choosing, and I think before you put in all that time, once you get them evaluated, you'll know if it's what the potential of it working out or not is going to be. So yeah.
And so much of this is about the relationship too between the dog and the handler.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and especially because the dog has to be off leash, they have to be
right.
That is going
into god awful areas.
Yeah.
like when we do hot loads on helicopters, you can see right away who has a relationship with that dog and who doesn't.
What is that?
So that the helicopter's going and you've got to hop on.
Oh,
And, there's the noise, the wind, for a young dog that can be like a little intimidating.
yeah.
But I want my dog to go, all right, you're going, I'm in.
Yeah. Cool.
And that's the relationship you have to develop.
Right.
You should check out the rough muffs, which are earmuffs from our canine audiologist that was here 2 weeks ago. Protect the ears of the dogs for helicopters.
That's right. All right. All right. Thank you so much, Donna. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been so interesting. There's a lot of stuff. This is why it's like so fascinating, a whole different world of, search and rescue that's so different from nose work, right? It's the requirements are different.
There's so many things that are intertwined, our dogs, their body changes, sourcing odor are just like our nose dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that intertwine. It's just that maybe we work way bigger areas in much longer time.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Great questions.
Like or follow our Facebook page so you can keep abreast of what's coming up next.
Okay, I will. Awesome.